Hi, my name is Paul Grogan and welcome to another Gaming Rules Quick and Dirty review. In this video I'm going to be talking about Coimbra, which is one of the games that my Patreon supporters voted on as a game that they wanted to hear my thoughts on. So Coimbra is a game that came out in 2018, it's for 2 to 4 players and the box says it takes 60 to 90 minutes to play, which is probably about right once you've played the game a few times, but your first few games will be longer than that as you learn the rules and look things up. Now the game was soft launched at Origins 2018 and then soft launched again, I believe, at Gen Con 2018, but Essen was the first release of the game, which is when I managed to pick up a copy of it and play it. And lots of people were telling me after Origins and after Gen Con and especially after Essen that I am going to love this game. I'm really going to like this game a lot. So many people were telling me that. Do I not? Yes, I do. When I eventually get round to filming my top 5 or top 10 games of 2018, which I might wait a while to do, at the moment, this is likely to be in there as one of my favourite games that came out in 2018. I just really enjoyed the game. For me, it's that sweet spot. Any heavier than this, and I would at the moment start to enjoy it a bit less. There's a couple of parts of the game which I think maybe could have been stripped out and streamlined a little bit, but overall, this hits my sweet spot of decision space, complexity, and everything else. So what is the game about? Well, it really doesn't matter because there's very little theme in the game. And I'm saying that not as a problem whatsoever because I don't care about theme in games. The setting of this game is 15th to 16th century Portugal, and you're doing stuff and you're a powerful house and you're influencing characters and you're visiting monasteries and you're funding expeditions. But that's irrelevant. In my opinion, it's the mechanics of this game which really make the game shine. What you're actually doing in the game, for me, doesn't actually matter whatsoever. Now, the game is extremely well structured. It has 4 rounds. It's divided into a number of phases. You have your player boards here and the phases are all described on here so you know where you are. And the game does flow really smoothly and really quickly. Now, the important part of the game is dice drafting. And it does dice drafting. This is probably my favourite dice drafting game. I like dice drafting games, but in this game, it is so clever. You roll the dice at the start of the turn. The number of dice here are for a 3-player game. They're slightly different depending on player counts. And then basically in turn order, each player will choose a die, put it into one of those little plastic castles, which are awesome, and then place it into one of these areas of the city. Sounds simple. But the colour of the dice is important and the number of the dice is important. And the number on the dice will indicate how quickly you get to go. So if you take the 6, for example, if I take this orange 6 and put it into my castle and I decide to put it here, then I am going to get first choice in this area. Because anybody else who puts the 6 there now, there isn't one, but if there was one, anybody else who puts the 6 there will go after mine. So the order of the dice in each area indicate the order in which that area is resolved. So great, I'm going to get to go first in this area, which means I'm going to get my choice of one of these characters. Fantastic. How much does the character cost? 6, because that's the value on the dice. Whereas, if I was to take the 2, for example, then I will likely be last choice in that area, but I'm only going to pay 2 for it. So straight away, that is a really important decision that you need to make. And you need to factor in what the other players are likely to do to see if there's a particular character that they are going to want to take and you really want it. But also, the colour of the dice is also really important because you have these 4 tracks here. And basically, after you've done all of the character selection, each player then gets to use their 3 dice. And it's just the colour of the dice at this point that matters. The value is irrelevant. And the colour of the dice basically triggers the track on here. So in this example, I have taken a grey dice. I then get to trigger the grey track, and I am the red player, which means I get 5 guards. That's how that works. But you have so many decisions going on when you take a dice. Which one do I take? Which colour do I take? Where do I put it? And you don't choose the character at that time, but you've got to put it there thinking, right, okay, well, I'm gonna take that one. Now, at this point in the game, I am going to cover the 2 and 3 player rules because you always use these 12 characters. You always use 12 characters, okay? More characters will come out at the end of the round and any that are not taken will disappear. But in order to simulate the other players, the game uses these cardboard chits. And I really like the way that these work. Some people have said, not too keen on it because it's predictable, and I like the fact that it's predictable. I like the fact that you know there's a 4 here, which means if I place a 2, I am going after the dummy player, and you know exactly what the dummy player is going to do. So you can actually plan it and think about it ahead of time. Whereas in a 4-player game, you don't use any of these counters whatsoever. And it's not random, but it's less predictable because the other players might choose, a different thing. So I really like the way that they work in a 2 and 3 player game, but it does mean because it's predictable, you have a bit more to think about. Now, other mechanics I like about the game, I've mentioned the dice drafting a lot, and I'm saying that's where your major decision comes in. The rest of it all stems from there because the things that you collect and the different powers of the different tracks will get you the guards and the gold, which are the 2 different types of currency in the game, which I didn't mention, but you buy these cards with guards or currency, and you have 2 tracks on your player board to track them. You've got movement points around the board where you move your little figure around the board and it visits these monasteries, and when you visit a monastery, you get the bonus of that monastery. And these are not the same in every game. They will be shuffled and laid out. And then you've got the green track, which is pure victory points. But you have all of this, it's the same game, but it's kind of like, oh, I've done that. Oh, and now we've got this bit as well. And a lot of the game points that you're going to get is in funding these voyages here. So there are 15 voyage cards in the game, and you pick 6 of them at the start of the game and lay them out. So there's variability in here, as well as variability in the monasteries. And then you can fund these expeditions. And this isn't an action. This is something that each player gets to do once per round. And there's only 4 rounds, but there are 6 there. There is a way you can get an extra one. But you need to choose which ones you're going to go for, and each one of them will score points in different ways. This is sort of like a point salad style game. There's lots of different ways of getting points, and it's how you put it together. There's some engine building aspects of the cards I've got a card which is going to give me 2 movement points every time I draft a green dice, for example. Right, so you've got a little bit of an engine going. Some of the cards are pure end game points, and some of the cards just give you one-off immediate abilities. Now, I mentioned there's a lot going on. There is a lot going on. And there's end game scoring as well for your position on the tracks, and there's all sorts of other things. A few people that I've played it with said there is a little bit too much going on. So if we're going to start covering negatives, for me, it's not a negative. I like my medium to heavy games, and this is pretty much at the upper limit of what I'm happy with at this point in my life. But for some people, I know they've struggled a little bit because there is a little bit too much going on. There are these little tokens here, which you place on certain cards. And these tokens give you crowns, and the number of crowns you've got determines stuff. Yeah, okay, I get it. It's a little fiddly. Maybe the game could have done without that. I mean, from a balancing point of view, it's probably needed. But it's just one of those extra little bits. There's also a little bit of set collection. Some of these cards have little diplomat emblems on, and there's a set collection bonus at the end of the game. And some people have suggested, that's one step too far. That should have gone, and I get that. But if you remove that, you also remove some of the voyages and some of the monasteries that also give you those emblems. So by taking out one thing, you end up having to take out a number of other things. And I'm not saying it should be taken out. I'm just saying that there is quite a lot going on in the game, certainly for your first game. Now, components-wise, really good. The game, everything in the game is good. The cards are good quality. The components are good quality. The dice are standard dice, but everything's fine. There's absolutely no problems with it whatsoever. The artwork, I don't really see the artwork because I see the graphic design more than the artwork. I mean, I quite like it, but I don't really look at it. Does it get in the way of the game? No. The graphic design is, should I say perfect? I very rarely say perfect, but it's very good. You look at it and everything is intuitive. Really, really like it. Now, there's a lot of icons in the game. And I've read a few people say, the game's great, but there's too many icons, it's too confusing. For me, it doesn't matter how many icons there are. If the icons are clear, the graphic design is good. And your first game, you're going to have to look in the rulebook for an explanation of what all of the different card effects do. And you're probably going to have a look in your second game as well. And then even in your third game, there might be one that you're like, what does this do again? And when you look at it, you're like, I don't understand what that does. And then you look it up and you're like, that's what it does. So there's a lot of iconings in the game, and that doesn't make the graphic design bad. I think the graphic design is very good, and the iconography is very good. There is just a lot of it. Rulebook-wise, I thought the rulebook was excellent. It's all well laid out. It's really nice. There's lots of examples. Everything was clear. The only problem I have with it is it's not gender neutral, which is a big thing of mine. I expect to lose a few subscribers every time I say that. But apart from that, it is very good. I mentioned the icons. If you look at the back, we have the bonuses of all of the start characters, the other characters. Everything's in here and it's all very well explained. And it's at the back of the rulebook, which is the best place for it. So you can look everything up. All the voyage cards as well. Yeah, so rulebook was really good. Gameplay, really good. Really enjoy playing it. Now, one comment about the two-player game. I've played this game at 2, 3 and 4 players. The two-player game did our heads in. I would definitely play it at two-player again, but the thought processes and the decision space in the two-player game was just like, when we started playing, we did the first round. And we was like, what? There's only 4 rounds in this game. This will be a half-hour game. We're going to be done in half an hour, 40 minutes. And then we started thinking about it, and it was about an hour and a half. Now, it's not a problem because, you know, it was a really good and it was a tense and it was a tight game. But as I mentioned at the start, with the colour of the dice that you take and the number of the dice you take, and then the character you take, and then you're like, oh, well, if I take that character, that's going to give me 3 points if I do this. So you're planning to do that, and then you're planning to do this. And so much rests on that decision. It's all good. It all hangs together well. I really enjoy it. But I can see how for some people there is, you know, a lot to think about. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on was the perceived balance issues with this game. Like most games that come out, people will say, this track's way too powerful. A friend of mine, Phil, says, don't play with this discovery card, it's broken, remove it from the game. I've read quite a few various reports here and there of certain things are a bit too good, the purple track's too good. For me, I've not seen that yet. Maybe I've not played the game enough. It is a game that I, at the moment, will never say no to. A game of this, I will happily play it at 2, 3 and 4. I think the printed box time of 60 to 90 minutes is probably about right for a 2-player game once you know what you're doing, and probably about right for a 4-player game as well, once you know what you're doing. Yeah, and as I mentioned at the start, this is one of my favourite games that came out in 2018. So to all of those people who suggested this game to me and said that I was going to like it, you're correct. Thank you very much for recommending it. Thank you very much for persuading me to go and speak to Plan B Games at Gen Con. Coimbra, that's everything I can think of, unless I've forgotten something, at which point I'll record something else and edit it back in and you won't see this, except I'll probably keep this in. Anyway, I'm waffling. Thank you very much for watching. As mentioned at the start, this game was voted on by my Patreon supporters as one of the games that I would review this month. So if you enjoy the content that I make, then please consider supporting me over at patreon.com/gaming rules. And until next time, take care and thanks for watching. Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.